Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 7th day of March in the year of our Lord 2025. I'll be talking about Europe, Zelensky and the war in Ukraine, as well as the president's speech to Congress and the Democrat reaction to that speech. I will start today's report with a disclaimer. When I talk about Democrats and say nasty but always truthful things about them, when I refer to them in some disparaging terms, I'm talking about the politicians and their useful idiots in the media, not about individual Americans who identify as Democrats, many of whom are dear friends or even relatives, so I have no apology to offer for anything I have said or will say about Democrat politicians, because if I did not believe my position to be true, I would certainly change it. In addition, there are some Republican politicians almost as bad as Democrats, almost as bad, but not quite, because they know better, but are simply reacting as the self-serving political hypocrites that they are. The title of this Castle Report is taken from a quote by Thomas Jefferson offered more than 200 years ago, but just as true today as it was then. Quoted, "I have deemed it fundamental for the United States to never take active part in the quarrels of Europe. Their political interests are entirely distinct from ours, their mutual jealousies, their balance of power, their complicated alliances, their forms and principles of government are all foreign toys. They are nations of eternal war," end quote. Yes, Mr. Jefferson. They are indeed nations of eternal war, and since the end of World War II, we, the United States, have been as well, because we have served as the military enforcement arm of the European nations, especially NATO members. Some events have recently come to pass that give me reason to hope that situation might at least be starting to change. One of those events was the meltdown in the Oval Office by President Zelensky of Ukraine. Why would a man with almost no cards in his hand, at least no winning cards, make such a defiant spectacle of himself in the office of the President of the United States? The New York Post has the answer for us. Quote, "Before meeting Trump, Zelensky met with the anti-Trump Democrats who advised him to reject the terms of the mineral deal the president was offering, according to Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut. Senator Murphy said, just finished a meeting with President Zelensky here in Washington. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine." He attached a picture of Zelensky at a conference table with Murphy seated on the opposite side, end quote. Some people have said that by listening to the Democrats, Zelensky betrayed his country and its people, but my question is, what about the Democrats? Who or what did they betray? They betrayed the American people. They hindered the president's ability to end a war that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. That could be a violation of the Logan Act regarding foreign policy, but it is at least dangerous and reckless, uncaring behavior. Trump offered Zelensky a deal whereby he could express his gratitude to America by ceding the mineral rights to the very valuable rare earth minerals that lie under the Ukrainian soil. You can hear my podcast, my Castle Report, called "Ukraine is a Gold Mine," by going to the index and finding 61424. In that podcast, I explained that neocon Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, tells us that we have to stay in Ukraine, in the Ukraine war, because it has a lot of valuable minerals under its soil. Trump knows about the valuable minerals, and he therefore proposed that Zelensky sign an agreement ceding the rights to those resources to the United States in return for continued military and other economic support. The deal also would expect Zelensky to show some gratitude, some humility for the roughly $200 billion that are actually admitted to, already provided to Ukraine. Zelensky was not humble, however. He was not grateful. He was instead arrogant, demanding, just as the Democrats advised him to be. The Democrats, it seems, misread this room just as they misread the election. The American people gave their opinion that they wanted peace. Trump was the only one promising peace. Here, with what amounts to an adversary, the Democrats intentionally sabotaged the president's efforts to end the war, a truly despicable act, potentially causing many deaths for partisan political purposes. It comes very close to a political crime resulting potentially in mass loss of life, otherwise known as mass murder. However, having said all that, I don't like the deal. I don't like the deal Trump offered Zelensky, and here is why. I don't think Zelensky should be grateful, but neither do I think he should be insulting. It was Zelensky, with Democrat encouragement, who wanted this Oval Office meeting. Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained that they wanted to handle the negotiations diplomatically. But Zelensky insisted on the meeting. Why? Why would he do that? He, with Democrat encouragement, wanted this stage show for the world to embarrass Trump while the war continues. He, Zelensky, that is, insisted on a U.S. guarantee of security for Ukraine, and he continued to press for NATO membership, both unobtainable dreams. The reason I don't think he owes the U.S. gratitude is that the U.S. is at least partially responsible for this war through its actions toward Russia going back to 1990, especially its involvement in the Ukrainian coup of 2014. Additionally, in the early stages of the war, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin explained to us that the real purpose of U.S. involvement in the war was to weaken Russia. It was not to help the Ukrainian people find freedom and resist. It was to weaken Russia. Lindsey Graham helped us out by telling us how valuable Ukraine was in terms of its natural resources, something worth fighting for under that Ukrainian dirt. In other words, it was about the U.S. and its own political and imperialistic desires, not about Ukraine and its people at all. The proposal for Ukraine's rare earth minerals, so valuable in today's world, I don't like that either. In fact, I completely disagree with it. It's not much different from the European colonial period where the nations Great Britain, France, Germany, and Portugal went about the world acquiring colonies by military conquest. The U.S. had to come along and, in a sometimes vain effort, clean up their mess, as we tried to do in Vietnam. So, no, I don't like it. I don't like it, and I hope the president will take a different approach. What approach would I recommend to President Trump? I would tell him, if I could, to understand what has happened in Ukraine throughout history, what has happened so far, and why Ukraine should be free to negotiate deals with private companies of its own choosing for the minerals it is incapable of mining on its own. We should advise Zelensky that he should make some accommodation with Russia, because unless he wants our help in the negotiations, we are out of there, and immediately. If he does not accept our help, then we will help him with negotiations with Russia, and then we are out, because we have decided to finally listen to Mr. Jefferson, finally follow his advice. I would tell the Europeans that NATO was formed as a defensive alliance, but now it has evolved and has done nothing but provoke war. And it now has us on the brink of a nuclear confrontation with Russia. The United States is therefore withdrawing from NATO. And if you Europeans want to continue your destruction of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, you are on your own. If you get yourself involved in a kinetic war with Russia, please keep it on your side of the Atlantic and don't come crying to us as you have so many times before. Zelensky's demands on their face are absurd, unobtainable, a waste of breath. The only purpose I can see in them is a political show for Trump's Democrat enemies at home and his European enemies abroad. Excuse me, folks. Make a deal with Russia. Make a deal with China. Start the process by talking to them. Talk to everybody. Be a friend of liberty, a friend everywhere, but a guarantee only our own. Ask all those Democrat senators if they would be willing to send their own sons, their own daughters, into the Ukrainian meat grinder to ensure the independence from Russia of the Russian-speaking provinces of eastern Ukraine and of Crimea. There's so much in this political world that's just for show, simply jostling for power. Unfortunately, That gamesmanship costs lives, and in the case of this war, hundreds of thousands of lives. Stop all this war and colonial exploitation. Come home. Come home and mind your own business. Start paying attention to problems here, right here in America. We have people here without medical insurance or any way to get medical treatment when they need it. People in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, many other places have no homes due to the hurricane. People in California, the same condition due to the wildfires. Infrastructure is crumbling across the country. It needs maintenance in virtually the entire country. I like the instructions to drill, baby, drill, although it sounds trite. There are hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of jobs in that industry. Let's put people back to work, actually doing something productive, not just hire them to make our fake numbers look a little better. No more stimulus, no more giveaways, because that just fuels inflation, costs everybody money in the long run. It's always a net loss for everyone except the power-seeking politicians. Bill Bonner explains to us again, quote, "The feds hold no bake sales. They sell no cookies door to door, nor do they engage in charitable fundraising. They produce few goods, few services that people would willingly pay for. When they want money, they just take it. So it was last year that they took $4.9 trillion in tax revenue, but they spent $6.7 trillion. Whence cometh the difference? From other forms of taxation, inflation, primarily in tariffs," end quote. If I could accomplish one thing, folks, one thing from these Castle reports, it would be to show people that unless we do something to quickly balance the budget and reduce debt, we are headed for disaster. Trump is at least trying to stem the flow of waste and fraud. People, I hope, can understand that Medicare, Medicaid, especially Social Security, are made stronger by eliminating waste and fraud, not weaker. The Democrats choose to alarm people when fraud is found. I suspect it is not because they believe their frightening headlines, but because they profit from the fraud. They want to keep it coming. Hopefully, the election process will punish those politicians who cannot read the room and continue to act like spoiled children. Didn't their rout in the recent election teach them anything? Can't they understand that the man they hate so much is standing there speaking to them because the American people wanted him there? Yes, you can sit on your hands, hold up your childish signs, scroll through your phones while the president is speaking. When the president introduces some poor child with lifetime cancer, just sit there and don't applaud. The people see you. They won't forget. So just keep it up. Keep it up. The midterms are just around the corner. In conclusion, folks, it is past time for the war in Ukraine to be ended. It took an act of criminal insanity for the U.S. to involve itself in a border war between two countries on the other side of the world. Ukraine or the Ukraine means borderland. That's what the word means. It was once just a region with shifting borders until Lenin created it as a territory just after World War I ended. Why would the U.S. commit this act of insanity? For one thing, Ukraine has become a massive black hole, swallowing up hundreds of billions of dollars, and is in effect a giant laundromat for that money. Something like 30% of all the weapons delivered to Ukraine were sold on the black market to terrorists and Mexican drug cartels, yet we keep sending more for two. Number two, the U.S. and the Europeans say they fear that Russia wants to conquer Europe, but folks, I suspect it's the other way around. The Soviet Union could not conquer Europe, only Eastern Europe. The Russian Federation is far less capable than the Soviet Union, but if the Europeans are under some delusion they can defeat Russia in a war, someone should enlighten them. Countries with 6,000 nuclear missiles do not surrender, and they do not accept defeat with missiles still in their silos. Finally, folks, I pray for Donald Trump. I wish him much success. Since 1971, the dollar has lost 88% of its purchasing power. The top 1% have taken over 50% of all wealth in the country just since 2008. U.S. manufacturing jobs have been cut by nearly half. This was not an accident, folks, but by design. And now, for the first time, an administration is at least trying to dismantle the system of fraud and waste. What do Trump's resistors people who call themselves resistors, what do they want? More debt? More unchecked spending? More OPEC finances? Resistance, as they see it, really means keep the checks flowing to us. At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.